In the digital era, where every moment is captured, broadcasted, and dissected, privacy has become one of the rarest and most underestimated forms of power. While the world constantly encourages you to share your thoughts, your opinions, your achievements, your struggles, it is essential to understand that what you keep to yourself can often be far more valuable than what you reveal. Privacy allows you to move in silence, to grow without interference, and to plan without scrutiny. It shields your motivations and protects your vulnerabilities. When people know everything about you, your habits, your weaknesses, your ambitions, they gain unearned access to your internal world. That access becomes a tool in the wrong hands. Enemies don't always come at you head on. Sometimes they smile while listening, quietly collecting details they can one day use to tear you down. The less others know about your personal life, the more unpredictable you become, and unpredictability is often mistaken for strength. Privacy is not about hiding, it's about safeguarding your agency. It gives you the freedom to reinvent yourself without resistance. It lets you make mistakes and learn from them privately without being subjected to the harsh, unforgiving court of public opinion. It allows you to test ideas, evolve in silence, and emerge stronger, clearer, and more in control. A person who knows when to speak and when to stay silent becomes someone who commands respect, not just attention. Those who are always broadcasting every emotion, every goal, every argument, and every setback are unknowingly building a cage around themselves. That cage is built from the expectations of others, from external pressures, from being boxed into an identity that no longer fits, but is too public to escape. When you guard your privacy, you maintain control over your identity. You get to decide who you are and who you are becoming, not the crowd, not the critics, not the algorithms that feed on your data. Additionally, privacy creates room for authenticity. When you're not performing for others, you're free to be real with yourself. You're not worried about likes, judgments, or opinions. You're focused on substance, not display. You're committed to growth, not applause. And in that space where no one is watching, you make your most important decisions, develop your strongest values, and build a foundation no one can shake. Privacy empowers you to live by design, not by reaction. You don't need to announce your next move for it to be impactful. You don't need to prove your progress for it to be real. What people don't see, they can't disrupt. What they don't know, they can't corrupt. And in that unseen space, you're not hiding, you're mastering yourself. There is a growing trend in our modern culture that equates constant openness with authenticity. The more someone reveals about themselves, the more they are applauded for being real. But there is a fine line between authenticity and exposure. And when that line is crossed, it starts to erode the very boundaries that protect your mental, emotional, and even physical well-being. Oversharing, whether in casual conversations, online posts, or emotional outbursts, gradually strips you of your personal space, your sense of control, and your sense of self. Every time you share a detail about your life, your family problems, relationship issues, finances, insecurities, or internal conflicts, you are opening a door. You might believe you're being transparent or even brave, but in reality, you're handing people a map to your inner world, and not everyone who receives that map has good intentions. Some people listen not to support, but to store information. Some observe not to understand, but to use what you reveal as leverage, gossip, or silent judgment. When you overshare, you also unintentionally train others to disrespect your emotional space. You blur the lines between what's personal and what's public. Suddenly, people begin to feel entitled to opinions about things that were never their business in the first place. They begin asking questions that cross emotional boundaries. They start expecting access to parts of you that should have remained sacred. This happens not because others are always intrusive, but because you set the tone by giving too much too soon. Oversharing often comes from a subconscious desire to be seen, to be validated, or to build connections quickly. But connection built on unfiltered vulnerability is fragile. It feels intense, but it's rarely rooted in mutual respect or trust. Instead, it invites shallow understanding, premature closeness, and eventual disappointment. People may be drawn to your openness, but they may not have the capacity to hold it with care, and when they fail to handle it properly, the wound of exposure deepens. Another danger of oversharing is that it sabotages your ability to process your emotions privately. When you're constantly sharing your experiences in real time, especially the painful or complex ones, you rob yourself of the clarity and strength that come from sitting with your thoughts in solitude. Instead of understanding your own feelings, you're distracted by how others might perceive them. Instead of healing internally, you chase external feedback. This doesn't just damage your emotional boundaries, it also diminishes your emotional maturity. Moreover, not all relationships are meant to be deep. Some people are meant to know the professional you, the casual you, or the surface level version of you. That is not deception, that's emotional intelligence. When you overshare with everyone, you flatten those distinctions. You treat every relationship as if it's built for full access, which ultimately leaves you vulnerable and unprotected in environments where discretion should have been your shield. In a time where constant exposure is the norm, where people announce every thought, broadcast every move, and document every moment of their lives, mystery has become a powerful and rare quality. Those who know how to maintain an element of mystery are often seen as more intriguing, more dignified, and most importantly, more respected. Mystery is not about being secretive for the sake of secrecy. It's about preserving your inner world in a society that relentlessly demands access to it. When people don't know everything about you, they cannot reduce you to a label, a role, or a single narrative. People are naturally curious, and what they cannot figure out, they tend to approach with more caution and attentiveness. When you are mysterious, you shift the dynamic. People begin observing you rather than assuming things about you. They watch what you do instead of relying solely on what you say. They speak less and listen more because your silence, your restraint, and your self-control set a tone that commands thoughtful interaction. Mystery compels people to engage you with a sense of respect rather than familiarity because they are unsure of your full story, your full depth, or your true intentions. There's also a psychological component to mystery. When someone appears unpredictable, yet composed, when they are difficult to read but consistent in character, they are often viewed as more powerful. This isn't manipulation. It's about understanding that your emotional privacy, your personal intentions, and your future plans should not be open to public dissection. When people can't categorize you quickly, they have to consider you more seriously. They're slower to make assumptions, more hesitant to speak over you, and more careful about how they approach you. Mystery also creates a protective barrier around your identity. The less others know about your past, your pain, your ambitions, and your inner workings, the harder it is for them to project their insecurities onto you or form one-dimensional conclusions. You're not easily boxed in or dismissed because no one has a full picture of who you are or what drives you. You maintain narrative control, not by oversharing, but by choosing when, how, and with whom you reveal certain layers of yourself. In relationships, whether personal or professional, mystery creates balance. It teaches people not to take your presence for granted. It sets a tone of mutual curiosity, where connection grows gradually and naturally rather than being forced through overexposure. Too often, people give everything up front, every thought, every detail, every wound. And while it may feel honest, it can quickly lead to being misunderstood, devalued, or emotionally drained. But when you reveal yourself slowly and intentionally, you allow others to truly earn your trust, not just consume your truth. Mystery is also a form of self-respect. It says, Not everyone gets to know all of me. It reinforces the idea that your inner life is not up for constant public display and that you reserve the right to protect your peace, your process, and your personal growth. You don't have to explain your silence. You don't have to announce your next move. You don't need to make your emotions performative. You can simply live, grow, and act, and let the results speak louder than the storytelling ever could. Ultimately, people may admire those who share everything, but they respect those who don't feel the need to. They respect those who let their boundaries speak, whose silence holds meaning, and whose presence suggests depth far beyond what is immediately visible. Vulnerability is often praised as a sign of emotional strength, maturity, and authenticity, and rightly so. When expressed in the right context with the right people, vulnerability can deepen trust, create genuine bonds, and foster emotional resilience. But there is a crucial truth that often goes unspoken: vulnerability is not free. It is not a currency to be thrown around at random. It is a privilege that should be granted only to those who have shown they are worthy of it. Because the reality is, not everyone deserves to know your story. Not everyone is capable of holding your truth with care. There is a difference between being open and being exposed. When you are quick to share your deepest fears, your personal struggles, or your emotional wounds with people who haven't proven their loyalty, you take a profound risk. You give them access to your most sensitive self without knowing if they will protect it or weaponize it. Vulnerability without discernment is not bravery, it is recklessness. You may think you are connecting when in truth, you are handing your emotional power to someone who may not have the maturity or empathy to handle it. People often romanticize vulnerability as a shortcut to closeness, but closeness built on premature exposure is a fragile foundation. It creates an illusion of intimacy without the strength of trust. It's easy to confuse attention for care and sympathy for loyalty, but attention fades and sympathy can turn into gossip when the wrong person holds your secrets. Vulnerability must be measured, thoughtful, and rooted in earned trust. Otherwise, it becomes a liability. Some individuals will present themselves as safe spaces, kind, attentive, and supportive in the beginning. But time reveals whether someone's interest in your story is based on genuine care or just curiosity. There are people who seem interested in you simply because they're collecting emotional information, looking for weak points, or positioning themselves to feel superior. When you reveal too much to such people, you give them the emotional ammunition they can later use against you through manipulation, betrayal, or judgment. You also dilute the meaning of vulnerability when you give it freely to anyone. What is rare holds value. When you share your private self with everyone, it no longer feels sacred. It becomes performative. It's not true vulnerability if it's used to gain attention, validation, or fast-tracked intimacy. It's a performance wrapped in emotional openness. True vulnerability requires depth, courage, and patience. It requires silence before speech, observation before confession, and time before trust. Just as you wouldn't hand a key to your home to a stranger, you shouldn't hand a key to your heart to someone who hasn't earned your trust through consistency, empathy, and respect. Emotional intimacy must be built slowly and intentionally. Trust is not a right, it is a reward for proven character. In a world saturated with noise, where everyone is talking, posting, arguing, and reacting, silence has become a rare and underrated form of power. People often feel pressured to speak constantly, whether to defend themselves, to prove their worth, to clarify their intentions, or to be seen. But silence, when used with purpose, can be more powerful than 1,000 carefully crafted words. It is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is strategy. And those who understand the value of silence often move ahead with greater control, influence, and clarity. Silence gives you space to observe what others miss. While people are busy talking, often revealing their motivations, insecurities, and biases, You are listening. You are studying tone, intention, timing. In your silence, you gain insight into people's patterns, their inconsistencies, their true feelings behind the facade. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is a different language. It speaks through restraint, through presence, through the power of not reacting to everything that demands your attention. Not every opinion deserves your response. Not every insult warrants your explanation. There is strength in refusing to dignify nonsense with engagement. When you respond to everything, you show that you are easily disturbed, easily provoked, easily controlled. But when you remain silent, you confuse those who seek to destabilize you. You deprive them of the reaction they crave. You disrupt their rhythm. And in doing so, you reclaim your power. Silence allows you to choose your battles. It forces others to guess what you're thinking, and often what they imagine is more intimidating than anything you might have said. Strategic silence also prevents you from oversharing. It creates boundaries without confrontation. When you choose not to speak about something, you are not being cold, you are protecting something sacred. You are drawing an invisible line that others must not cross. And in that silence, you command a quiet authority. People may not always understand you, but they will be cautious around you. They will second guess themselves. They will pay attention. In conflict, silence can be a weapon or a shield depending on how you wield it. In times of uncertainty, silence gives you the pause needed to think clearly rather than react emotionally. When emotions are high and the environment is chaotic, speaking prematurely can lead to irreversible consequences. Silence buys you time. It allows your mind to calm, your logic to rise, and your emotions to settle. It lets you see the bigger picture instead of getting caught in the heat of the moment. And in success, silence is equally powerful. Not announcing your every move, your every win, your every plan is a sign of maturity. You let your results speak for you. You let your actions echo louder than your announcements. The silent achiever often intimidates more than the loud one because no one can predict what they'll do next, and that uncertainty becomes their advantage. Silence also cultivates self-respect. When you stop explaining yourself to those who misunderstand you on purpose, when you no longer feel the need to justify your choices to people who haven't earned a voice in your life, you step into your personal authority. You realize that not everyone deserves your words, your energy, or your access. Every word you speak, every detail you reveal paints a clearer picture of who you are, not just to friends and supporters, but also to opportunists, manipulators, and those who only appear to have good intentions. The more you share about your fears, your dreams, your frustrations, and your weaknesses, the more data you're offering others to decode your behavior, predict your reactions, and ultimately influence your decisions. And the unsettling truth is that not everyone wants to understand you so they can support you. Some want to understand you so they can control you. Manipulation is rarely overt. It often disguises itself as concerned charm or attentiveness. A manipulator doesn't always come to you with threats. Sometimes they come with a smile, a listening ear, and a calculated interest in your life. They gather your emotional blueprints, your insecurities, your triggers, your values, by getting you to open up under the guise of trust. But the more information you give, the more power they quietly accumulate. Your openness becomes their weapon. Your transparency becomes their toolkit. When people know what makes you tick, they know how to pull the strings. If you reveal that you crave approval, they know how to flatter and guilt you. If you admit you fear being alone, they know how to abandon and return at will. If you confess that you're trying to prove yourself to others, they know how to position themselves as gatekeepers to your validation. This kind of manipulation isn't always malicious in appearance. It's subtle, psychological, and often deeply embedded in relationships that feel safe on the surface. Oversharing also disrupts the balance of power in any interaction. When you are an open book and the other person is not, you become vulnerable by default. They know your story, but you don't know theirs. They can anticipate your reactions, but you cannot predict theirs. This imbalance gives them the upper hand in conversations, negotiations, and even emotional dynamics. They don't need to force you to act a certain way. They just need to nudge you in the direction they already know you'll go. Furthermore, manipulators thrive on emotional leverage. They don't always need to lie or deceive to control. They just need to replay your own words back to you at the right time. A dream you once shared in confidence becomes a reason to pressure you into decisions. A fear you once admitted becomes a tool for gaslighting. A mistake you confess becomes a reference point in arguments. And the worst part, because you voluntarily shared that information, it feels like you handed them the very tools they're now using to undermine you. Even in non-manipulative environments, sharing too much can unconsciously shift how people treat you. When someone knows your weaknesses, they might unintentionally begin to see you through a lens of fragility. They may make decisions for you instead of with you. They may assume you're too sensitive, too doubtful, or too unsure to handle challenges because that's the version of you they've come to know through your own admissions. The story you tell about yourself shapes the way others treat you, and when that story is too vulnerable, it risks reducing your credibility and autonomy in their eyes. There is also a psychological effect on your own self-perception. When you constantly talk about your problems, your doubts, and your pain, you start to identify more with your wounds than with your strengths. You rehearse your fears instead of reinforcing your courage. You begin to see yourself as someone who is always struggling, always misunderstood, always needing help. And over time, this self-image makes you more susceptible to those who present themselves as rescuers, people who promise guidance, love, or support, but whose true motive is to gain control over you. There is an unspoken pressure in today's world to constantly explain ourselves, to justify every decision, clarify every silence, defend every boundary, and validate every emotion. This pressure doesn't always come from external authority. It often comes from within, a deep-rooted need to be understood, to avoid judgment, or to gain approval. But the truth is, you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to live your life, especially not to those who haven't earned the right to your vulnerability, your trust, or your energy. When you begin explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you enter into a cycle of self-doubt. You start tailoring your decisions to meet expectations that were never yours to begin with. You water down your truth to make it more palatable for others. You soften your boundaries to avoid seeming harsh, difficult, or cold. But in doing so, you slowly start to lose your identity. You begin shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's version of who you should be, rather than standing firm in who you truly are. Explanations are a form of emotional labor, and not everyone deserves it. Not everyone is entitled to know why you walked away from a relationship, declined an invitation, left a job, went silent, said no, or simply changed your mind. Some things are yours alone to process, to understand, and to navigate. When you constantly feel the need to offer justifications for your every move, you hand over control of your narrative to others. You give them permission to debate your choices, question your path, and place their lens over your journey. People who genuinely respect you won't demand explanations for your boundaries. They'll honor them. They won't interrogate your growth. They'll support it. They won't guilt you for your silence. They'll trust that it's needed. But those who challenge your every decision, those who twist your words or make you feel guilty for protecting your peace, are not seeking clarity. They're seeking control. They want to insert themselves into decisions that don't belong to them. They want to influence outcomes that only affect you. There is a certain peace that comes with choosing not to explain. It is not arrogance nor is it avoidance. It is a declaration of independence. It is a refusal to make your life a courtroom where your every choice must be defended under scrutiny. It is an understanding that your values and your timing, your feelings, and your healing do not need to be public discussions. When you stop over-explaining, you begin to trust yourself more. You begin to walk with inner confidence, rooted not in external validation, but in internal alignment. People will always have opinions. They will speculate. They will assume. They may even criticize, but none of that is your responsibility. Your responsibility is to honor what feels right, to protect your energy, and to walk your path with integrity. Constantly justifying your decisions doesn't lead to deeper understanding. It leads to burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. The more you explain, the more others feel entitled to question. The more you defend your every move, the more others believe they have the right to demand answers. There is an unspoken pressure in today's world to constantly explain ourselves, to justify every decision, clarify every silence, defend every boundary, and validate every emotion. This pressure doesn't always come from external authority. It often comes from within, a deep-rooted need to be understood, to avoid judgment, or to gain approval. But the truth is, you don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to live your life, especially not to those who haven't earned the right to your vulnerability, your trust, or your energy. When you begin explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you, you enter into a cycle of self-doubt. You start tailoring your decisions to meet expectations that were never yours to begin with. You water down your truth to make it more palatable for others. You soften your boundaries to avoid seeming harsh, difficult, or cold. But in doing so, you slowly start to lose your identity. You begin shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's version of who you should be, rather than standing firm in who you truly are. Explanations are a form of emotional labor, and not everyone deserves it. Not everyone is entitled to know why you walked away from a relationship, declined an invitation, left a job, went silent, said no, or simply changed your mind. Some things are yours alone to process, to understand, and to navigate. When you constantly feel the need to offer justifications for your every move, you hand over control of your narrative to others. You give them permission to debate your choices, question your path, and place their lens over your journey. People who genuinely respect you won't demand explanations for your boundaries. They'll honor them. They won't interrogate your growth. They'll support it. They won't guilt you for your silence. They'll trust that it's needed. But those who challenge your every decision, those who twist your words or make you feel guilty for protecting your peace, are not seeking clarity, they're seeking control. They want to insert themselves into decisions that don't belong to them. They want to influence outcomes that only affect you. There is a certain peace that comes with choosing not to explain. It is not arrogance, nor is it avoidance. It is a declaration of independence. It is a refusal to make your life a courtroom where your every choice must be defended under scrutiny. It is an understanding that your values, your timing, your feelings, and your healing do not need to be public discussions. When you stop over-explaining, you begin to trust yourself more. You begin to walk with inner confidence, rooted not in external validation, but in internal alignment. People will always have opinions. They will speculate, they will assume, they may even criticize, but none of that is your responsibility. Your responsibility is to honor what feels right, to protect your energy, and to walk your path with integrity. Constantly justifying your decisions doesn't lead to deeper understanding. It leads to burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. The more you explain, the more others feel entitled to question. The more you defend your every move, the more others believe they have the right to demand answers.